The cold wind whipped through the docks of Bar Harbor, causing the sails of the small anchored boats to sway gently. The smell of salt and fish permeated the air, mingling with the woody aroma of the old shipyards. Jack Sullivan, a 42-year-old man with calloused hands and a face etched by the sun and storms, sat on the deck of his boat, the Sea Ghost, watching the darkening horizon. He'd spent his entire life at sea. His father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather were all fishermen. But never, in all his years navigating these waters, had he felt as much fear as he did now. The night before, his best friend Tom Parker's boat had disappeared without a trace. A Coast Guard vessel found the wreckage of the Blue Horizon floating adrift, as if something gigantic had snapped it in half. No bodies were found, no sign of survivors, just deep, inexplicable marks on the hull, as if something had swallowed half the boat and spat the rest out. And before we continue with this intriguing story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps us bring more content like this to you. Now, let's get back to the story. Jack wasn't a man easily swayed by superstition, but something was definitely wrong. That wasn't a storm or just some accident, he muttered, clenching his fists. The town was restless. The fishermen gathered in small groups, whispering theories. Some said it was just a hidden rock that had destroyed Tom's boat. Others believed it might have been a giant great white shark. But the older ones spoke with wide eyes about the sea monster. "It's back! The demon of the ocean is back!" Jack scoffed at this, but the look of fear on the older fishermen's faces gave him pause. According to local stories, a gigantic creature had inhabited these waters for centuries, attacking boats and disappearing before anyone could prove its existence. "My grandfather used to say that monster doesn't chew, it swallows boats whole," said Roy McCarthy, a 68-year-old fisherman, as he filled his glass with whiskey. "Nobody ever survived to tell the tale." Jack rolled his eyes. Legends always circulated in fishing towns, and he didn't have time for fantasies. But when Sarah Dawson, a marine biologist and expert in deep-sea creatures, arrived in town that morning, with a serious look and a handful of reports in hand, Jack knew there was more to this story. "I need to show you something," she said, pushing a dossier across the table of the old tavern where they sat. Jack opened the folder and felt a chill run down his spine. Inside were maps, accounts of disappearances, and, most disturbing of all, sonar images captured by a research submarine from the University of Maine. And there, in the middle of the ocean, nearly 1,500 feet deep, was a colossal shadow, something that shouldn't have been there. This was recorded in the same area where the Blue Horizon disappeared, Sarah explained. "I've been studying abyssal creatures for years, but I've never seen anything like this." "Could it be a whale?" Jack asked, although his gut told him no. "No whale is this big," Sarah replied, pointing to the numbers. "Whatever this is, it's over 130 feet long." Jack felt his heart race. It was impossible. There were no marine animals that big living in these waters. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. The images Sarah had shown him wouldn't leave his mind. He remembered Tom's smiling face, their promises to go fishing together at the end of the week. Now his best friend was missing, possibly dead, and Jack needed answers. Before dawn, he grabbed his radio and contacted Sarah. "Let's go out to sea. I want to see this thing with my own eyes." She hesitated. "This could be dangerous, Jack. If this animal really is as big as it seems, we don't know what it's capable of. What if it is responsible for Tom's disappearance? I need to know." Sarah sighed, knowing she couldn't convince him to give up. "Then I'm going with you." The next day, under a cloudy sky and choppy seas, the Sea Ghost left Bar Harbor. Besides Jack and Sarah, 2 experienced crew members accompanied them. Derek Lowe, a brave young sailor, and Hank Wallace, an old fisherman, scarred from years facing the Atlantic storms. Their destination, the area where Tom had disappeared. As they sailed, the radio started to malfunction, emitting intermittent static noises. Sarah fiddled with the sonar equipment, trying to pick up something in the depths. "I'm getting something, but I'm not sure what it is." Jack approached and looked at the screen. On the display, a huge blip was moving slowly beneath the boat. "My God," Sarah murmured. Before they could react, the boat rocked violently, throwing everyone against the sides of the deck. "What the hell was that?" Derek yelled. Jack gripped the helm tightly, trying to stabilize the boat. The sea, which had been calm, now seemed to churn, as if something gigantic was moving beneath the surface. Then, a deafening sound filled the air. It was a deep, terrifying roar, something that didn't seem to belong to any known creature. Sarah's eyes widened. "That's not possible!" The sonar flashed frantically. The blip on the screen was growing, approaching too fast. And then, the water around the boat opened up into a colossal vortex. Jack barely had time to scream before he saw the monstrous shadow emerge from the depths. The sea ghost shook violently, as if it were being dragged by an invisible force. The colossal roar echoed across the ocean, deep and reverberating, making Jack's bones vibrate as if thunder was exploding inside him. Sarah clutched the sonar screen, her eyes wide. "It's right under us!" Jack gripped the helm, trying to keep the boat steady, but the sea was writhing in an uncontrollable whirlpool, as if something were rising from the depths. And then the water exploded upwards. It was like a bomb had detonated beneath the boat. The impact was so strong that Derek was thrown across the deck, crashing into the equipment barrels. Sarah held onto the mast, screaming something inaudible under the deafening noise. But Jack could only look ahead. A monstrous silhouette emerged from the ocean, as tall as a building. He saw black, glistening scales, thick tentacles coiling around the creature, and large, silvery eyes reflecting the light like headlights. "My God," Hank murmured, falling to his knees. "It's real! It's real!" The creature was colossal. Its serpentine body stretched far beyond what the eye could see, disappearing into the dark waters. But the most terrifying thing was its mouth, a cavern of jagged, uneven teeth, each one the size of a spear. And then it roared again. Jack felt the sound vibrate in his skin, a call that seemed to reverberate in the depths of the ocean. The air around them grew heavier, as if the ocean itself was reacting to the creature's presence. "It's studying us," Sarah whispered, still holding onto the mast. "As if it's deciding whether it's worth attacking us." But the decision had already been made. The monster lunged forward in a swift, fluid movement, and before Jack could react, one of the tentacles rose up and struck the side of the boat with brutal force. The sea ghost trembled as if it were made of paper, and everyone was thrown backwards. The hull groaned, and the wood began to crack under the absurd pressure. Derek got to his feet, bloodied. "If we stay here, we're dead." Jack knew he was right. With aching fingers, Jack turned the helm with all his might. "Start the engines! We need to get out of here!" Hank ran to the control panel and fired up the diesel engines. The boat roared in response, starting to move. But the monster didn't intend to let them escape. One of the gigantic tentacles emerged from the water and coiled around the deck, shaking the boat like a toy. Sarah screamed as she was thrown against the safety rails. Jack held onto the helm with all his strength, trying to maintain direction. "We have to make it let go," Derek yelled, running to the emergency cabin. He returned with a flare gun and, without hesitating, shot it directly at the tentacle gripping the boat. The red flame burned into the creature's scaly skin, and for a second, the monster let out a cry of pain, recoiling. "Now! Full speed!" Jack bellowed. The sea ghost sped away quickly, tearing through the waves, while the monster plunged back into the depths. For a moment, everything was silent. Only the engine and the crew's panting breath could be heard. "Did we escape?" Sarah murmured, still clinging to the rails. Jack didn't answer. He knew this wasn't over. The ocean became too calm. Then the sonar beeped again. Sarah looked at the screen and paled. "It's coming back, and it's coming faster this time." Jack looked back and saw the colossal shadow moving under the water, getting closer and closer. "Everyone, hold on!" The monster rose from the depths with absurd force, breaching the surface in an explosion of water, and this time it opened its mouth. Jack felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what was about to happen. The monster wasn't just going to attack them, it was going to swallow the whole boat. The sea ghost roared over the waves, its engine working to the limit as Jack forced the helm with all his strength. But there was no escape. The monster was coming too fast. The creature burst from the water once more, its colossal form rising against the cloudy sky like an abomination out of a nightmare. Its silvery eyes reflected the light of day, cold and inhuman, and its mouth opened into a cavernous pit of sharp teeth, large as spears. Jack knew what this meant. The monster wasn't going to play around anymore. It was going to swallow the whole boat. "Hold on!" Jack shouted, but no one needed a warning. The wind rose fiercely as the monster swooped down on them. The waves rose like walls, throwing the sea ghost from side to side. The roar of the creature was deafening, as if the ocean itself was screaming. Derek grabbed the emergency radio and started shouting to anyone who could hear, "This is the sea ghost. We are under attack by an unknown creature. We need help. Repeat, we need help." Static. The radio only returned crackles and static. The monster descended on the boat like an avalanche of darkness. Its mouth opened completely, a tunnel of death ready to devour them. Jack saw his entire life flash before his eyes. But then Hank acted. The old fisherman knew they had no way to escape. He looked at Jack, at Sarah, at Derek, and made a decision. Without hesitating, he grabbed a fuel barrel and started dragging it to the edge of the boat. "What the hell are you doing?" Sarah yelled. But Jack understood instantly. "Hank, no!" Too late. With a strength that didn't seem to belong to a man of his age, Hank opened the lid of the barrel and pushed it into the sea. The black oil began to spread over the water, forming a thick slick. And then Hank pulled a flare from his pocket. He looked at Jack one last time, a tired smile on his face. "You still have a chance. Take it." And then he jumped into the sea. "Hank!" Jack shouted, running to the edge of the boat. But the old fisherman didn't try to swim back. Instead, he raised the flare and lit the flame. In the same instant, fire exploded over the oily surface, creating a wall of flames between the sea ghost and the monster. The creature's roar changed in tone. For the first time, it sounded angry. It recoiled, its tentacles writhing in the air, avoiding the flames. Jack looked at Hank in the middle of the fire. The old man didn't scream. He didn't try to escape. He just accepted his fate. And then, in a single brutal stroke, the monster grabbed him with a tentacle and pulled him into the darkness. Hank disappeared forever into the depths of the ocean. The boat finally managed to speed away. The fire and Hank's sacrifice had given them enough time to escape, but no one celebrated. Jack was mute, his gaze lost on the horizon. Sarah was shaking, her eyes filled with tears. Derek was hunched over, breathing heavily. The sea became strangely calm again, as if nothing had happened. But then, Sarah saw something on the sonar. Her eyes widened. "It can't be." Jack approached and saw the data on the screen. At the bottom of the ocean, something was moving in circles, as if it were protecting a specific point in the abyss. "What is it?" Jack asked. Sarah swallowed hard. "I think this explains why this creature is here." She pressed some buttons, and the image became clearer. What appeared on the screen made Jack's heart freeze. There at the bottom of the ocean, far below what any human could reach, there was more. Much more. The monster wasn't alone. There were others. The sea ghost rocked gently on the water, now too calm. The engine hummed quietly, but no one spoke. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air, reminding everyone of Hank's sacrifice. Jack gripped the helm tightly, his knuckles white. He still felt the weight of the loss, still heard the monster's roar echoing in his mind. But now, something even more disturbing occupied his thoughts. The sonar didn't lie. That creature wasn't alone. Sarah stared at the screen, her lips parted in shock. At least 7 large forms were moving below them, circling slowly, as if protecting something even deeper. "Oh my God," she murmured. Jack looked at her, his stomach churning. "What are we seeing here, Sarah?" The biologist bit her lips, her eyes still glued to the data. "This isn't normal. Giant animals don't usually hunt in such organized groups, and look at this." She pointed to the screen. "They're not just swimming. They're patrolling a specific point on the ocean floor, as if they're protecting something." Derek leaned over the table, still smeared with dried blood on his forehead. Protecting what? Silence. Then Sarah took a deep breath and finally said what no one wanted to hear. "I think we found a nest." The words hung in the air like thunder about to strike. Jack blinked a few times, trying to absorb the information. "You're saying these things reproduce?" Sarah nodded slowly. "And if that's the case, it means there are a lot more of them out there." Derek cursed, running his hand over his face. "This is wrong, so wrong. This kind of creature shouldn't even exist." Jack agreed. The ocean had always held secrets, but something so gigantic and predatory simply couldn't have gone unnoticed for so long. "What the hell is going on here, Sarah?" She hesitated. Then she grabbed her tablet and started opening research files. "I didn't want to talk about this until I was sure, but a few weeks ago, satellites picked up strange activity at the bottom of the Atlantic. Unusual movements, changes in water temperature." She turned the screen towards Jack. "And then there was this." The screen showed a satellite image of a remote part of the ocean. In the center of the image, a gigantic hole, a kind of fissure open on the seabed. "This was recorded 3 months ago. It looks like something opened up at the bottom of the sea. A crack that wasn't there before." Jack frowned. "And you think these creatures came from there?" "I don't just think so. I'm sure of it." Silence weighed on the cabin. Jack looked at the sea. The surface was calm, but now he knew what was right below. An entire colony of those creatures. Derek crossed his arms. "So, what do we do now?" Jack closed his eyes for a moment. He wanted to simply run, forget all this, and never return to the sea. But he couldn't. Hank died so they could escape. Tom was devoured. How many more would die if they did nothing? He looked at Sarah and Derek, then made his decision. "We go back to land, tell everything to the authorities, to the government, to whoever will listen." Derek laughed humorlessly. "And you think anyone's going to believe us?" Jack sighed. "We'll make them believe." But before anyone could answer, the sonar beeped again. Something was rising. "It can't be," Sarah whispered, looking at the screen. Jack felt a deathly chill run down his spine. One of the creatures was emerging, rising rapidly from the depths, and it was even bigger than the first. "Shit!" Derek yelled. "It found us!" Jack gripped the helm. "Hold on to something, we're getting out of here!" The engine roared as the Sea Ghost accelerated, cutting through the waves. But they weren't fast enough. The colossal shadow rose even higher, and then the sea exploded again. The new creature leapt from the water, and this time they could see everything. It was even larger than the first, with thick tentacles extending into the air like living snakes and gigantic silvery eyes that seemed to pierce their souls. And then it let out a different roar. It wasn't a roar of attack. It was a warning. In the same instant, the sonar started beeping madly. Sarah looked at the data and paled. "No, it can't be." Jack looked at her, desperate. "What is it?" She stared at him and her voice came out weak. "The others, they're coming." Jack felt his blood run cold. Derek squinted. "What? How many?" Sarah swallowed hard. "All of them." The Sea Ghost roared over the waves, but it wasn't fast enough. The sonar beeped frantically, showing the huge silhouettes rising from the depths. First one, then 2, 3. 7 colossal creatures now surrounded the boat. Sarah was shaking as she looked at the data. "They're coming from all directions." Jack gripped the helm tightly. The ocean around them began to rise, rippling as if it were alive, as if the creatures were pulling the sea with them. Derek shouted from the stern of the boat, "We're surrounded, Jack. There's nowhere to go." Jack looked around, searching for a way out, but there was none. The monsters were cornering them, pushing the sea ghost into the center of a giant whirlpool that was starting to form. The largest of them, the leader, raised its scaly body above the water, its silvery eyes shining like cold moons. And then it roared. The sound was so deep and terrifying that it seemed to vibrate inside Jack's bones, as if it was something beyond human comprehension. Sarah covered her ears. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They're not just hunting, they're communicating." Derek looked at her, pale. "What? You're saying these things are intelligent?" Sarah just nodded, horrified. Jack tried to reason. The creatures weren't attacking directly. They were waiting. But waiting for what? That's when he realized. They were making sure the boat couldn't escape. They were about to swallow them all at once. The boat began to spin in the whirlpool, being pulled toward the center. Derek held onto the railings, his eyes wide. "Jack! Do something, man!" Jack thought fast. If they stayed there, they would die. But what if they could change the game? He looked at Sarah. "What if we don't try to escape?" She blinked, confused. "What?" Jack pointed to the leader of the pack. "They're testing us. They haven't killed us yet because they want something." Derek exploded in frustration. "What do they want, Jack? Us in their stomachs?" Jack took a deep breath. "What if we try to communicate?" Sarah swallowed hard. "You want to talk to them?" Jack looked at the giant creature. "Maybe it's the only way we'll get out of this alive." Jack grabbed a flare gun and approached the edge of the boat. Derek grabbed his arm. "Jack, don't do this." Jack looked at him. "Do you have another idea?" Derek was silent. Then he released Jack's arm. Jack lit the flare gun and raised it high in the air. The red light shone brightly, reflecting in the silvery eyes of the leader creature. For a moment, the entire ocean was silent, and then the creature responded. It raised a gigantic tentacle and, in a slow movement, touched the water in front of the boat, creating waves that seemed like rhythmic patterns. Sarah watched with wide eyes. "It's trying to communicate back." Jack took a step forward, keeping the flare raised. "What do you want?" he murmured, even knowing the creature wouldn't understand his words. The monster sank a little, and then it let out a second roar, quieter this time. And it was at that moment that Sarah realized something that made her blood run cold. "Jack," her voice trembled. "They're not killing us because they don't need to." Jack looked at her. "What do you mean?" Sarah pointed to the sonar, the crack that opened up on the ocean floor. She took a deep breath. "They didn't come out of there." Jack frowned. "Then what did?" Sarah closed her eyes for a second and whispered, "Something worse." Before Jack could react, the sonar went completely crazy. And then everything shook. A second explosion of water erupted in the middle of the ocean, but this time it wasn't one of the known creatures. It was something much bigger. The leader of the pack recoiled, its silvery eyes now filled with a fear that Jack had never seen before. Derek's eyes widened. If even they're scared, we're screwed. And then the thing emerged. The sea ghost rocked violently, almost capsizing with the force of the waves exploding around it. The thing emerging from the ocean was unlike anything Jack had ever seen before. The gigantic creatures that had surrounded them before seemed small in comparison. The surface of the sea shattered like cracking glass, revealing a monstrous and impossible shadow, something so ancient and powerful that the ocean itself seemed to tremble with its presence. Sarah lost her voice. Derek gripped the rail of the boat, his gaze fixed on that abomination rising from the abyss. "What is that?" he whispered. Jack couldn't answer. His heart was beating so hard that he thought it would stop at any moment. The new creature was bigger than a cargo ship. Its skin wasn't scaly like the others, but dark and rough, covered in scars and deep cracks that looked like volcanic fissures. Its eyes were different. They didn't shine silver like the other monsters. They were black, empty, lifeless. Sarah struggled to breathe, her eyes wide. "That shouldn't exist." Jack looked at her. "Do you know what that is?" She swallowed hard, still not taking her eyes off the monstrous thing emerging from the depths. I'm not sure, but Jack, I think... Before she could finish, the monster opened its mouth. And then hell began. The terrifying creature let out a roar so low and deep that the sea itself seemed to sink with it. The other creatures, the ones that had surrounded the boat, changed their behavior instantly. They snarled and recoiled as if they were terrified. That's when Jack realized the truth. "My God," he murmured. This is what they were trying to contain." Sarah looked at him, horrified. "They're not the villains in this story, Jack." Derek gasped, still staring at the larger monster. "They were protecting us." That's when the battle began. The creature from the abyss lunged forward with indescribable fury, throwing itself against the others. The sea became a chaos of roars, water, and violence. The tentacles of the smaller sea creatures whipped through the air, trying to ward off the monster from the abyss. But they were no match for it. It was stronger, fiercer, older. One of the smaller creatures was hurled away, falling into the water like a piece of stone. Another had one of its tentacles torn off in a brutal blow. Jack held tight to the helm, trying to keep the boat away from the chaos. "We need to get out of here, now!" Derek ran to the engines. "I'm going to give this boat everything it's got." Sarah was still watching the fight. "Jack, this won't hold out for long. If that thing wins..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. If the creature from the abyss won the fight, nothing else in the ocean could stop it. Jack looked at the wreckage around the boat. There was one last fuel barrel stuck on the railing of the deck. He looked at Derek. "Let's send this bastard back to the bottom of the ocean." Derek stared at him for a second and then smiled. "I like the plan." Together, the two dragged the barrel to the edge of the boat. "Sarah, give me a flare!" Jack shouted. She grabbed the last one and lit it. "It has to be a perfect shot, Jack!" Jack took the flare, aimed at the barrel floating in the middle of the monstrous battle, and fired. The fire exploded over the ocean, and then came the detonation. The water rose in a pillar of fire and fury, and in the middle of the explosion, the creature from the abyss roared in pain. The impact was so strong that it threw the sea ghost backwards. Jack felt his body flying across the deck and crashed against the cabin. Everything spun, and then silence. Jack woke up with the taste of blood in his mouth. The boat was still floating but barely holding itself together. Water was entering through the hull, and the side was shattered. Derek coughed beside him. "Are we still alive?" Jack struggled to get up and look at the sea. The battle was over. The creatures that had once surrounded the boat were now disappearing into the ocean, swimming back to the depths. The leader was guiding them, and the creature from the abyss, it wasn't there anymore. The sea was calming down again, as if the ocean was closing its wounds. Sarah came close to Jack, her face covered in cuts and dirt. "We did it." Her voice was a whisper. Jack nodded. "For now." Sarah looked at the water. "They let us live, Jack." Jack sighed, feeling the weight of what they had been through. "We weren't their problem." Derek laughed, despite all the exhaustion. "What do we do now?" Jack looked at the horizon. The sun was beginning to rise. He took a deep breath. "We go home and tell the world what we saw." The sea ghost floated precariously as the first rays of sun appeared on the horizon. The hull was cracked, the engines sputtering, and the crew completely exhausted. But they were alive. Jack gripped the helm with his calloused hands, guiding the boat back to shore. His eyes were red and heavy, but his mind was still reeling from the events of the last few hours. "We're almost there," Derek murmured, pointing to the distant coastline. Sarah remained silent, staring blankly at the ocean. She seemed lost in her own thoughts, as if she was still trying to process what they had seen. Jack looked at her. "What's wrong?" She took a moment to answer. "We saw something that no one should have seen, Jack. Something that the world isn't ready to know." Jack took a deep breath. "And what do we do with that?" Sarah pressed her lips together, clearly struggling with an internal dilemma. "If we tell the truth, we'll be called crazy. No one will believe us." Derek laughed bitterly. "Yeah, and even if they do, what are they going to do? Bombard the ocean? Hunt something that lives below 15,000 feet? Jack thought about that. They had survived. But the truth was that the creatures were still out there. The leader and the others had descended back into the abyss, and the thing that emerged from the fissure, well, they never found a body, and that meant it could come back. Sarah ran her hand through her disheveled hair. If that fissure in the ocean really opened up in the last few months, then who guarantees that others can't open up? Jack felt a chill run down his spine. If that creature had emerged now, how many others could emerge in the future? Derek looked at the wreckage of the boat. I don't know about you guys, but I'm never going back to the sea, not even if you paid me. Jack couldn't blame him. But there was something inside him that wouldn't let him simply walk away and forget all this. They had to tell the world. But how? Hours later, the Sea Ghost finally reached the coast of Bar Harbor. As soon as they docked at the port, a crowd formed around the boat. The fishermen and locals looked at them with expressions of shock and amazement. Roy McCarthy, one of the old fishermen in the town, was the first to approach. My God, what happened to you? Where's Hank? Jack lowered his head, feeling the weight of the loss of his old friend. He didn't make it. A deadly silence fell over the crowd. Many had already expected this answer, but hearing it from Jack made it real. Roy ran his hand over his wrinkled face. I knew it. I knew that thing in the sea wasn't just a legend. Sarah, still shaken, looked at Jack and Derek. Let's go straight to the authorities. We need to tell them what we saw. Derek scoffed. They're going to laugh in our faces. Jack wasn't sure. Something told him that they wouldn't be the first to talk about this. And he was right. The next day, Jack, Sarah, and Derek went directly to the Coast Guard. They reported everything. They told about the colossal monster, Hank's sacrifice, the battle between the creatures, and the even bigger thing that emerged from the depths. The officer who heard them, a serious man named Commander Blake Turner, didn't react as they expected. He didn't laugh, he didn't doubt. Instead, he sighed, closed his eyes for a moment, and then picked up a phone. They saw it, he said, in a calm and cold voice. We need immediate containment. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. Sarah frowned. You already knew, didn't you? The commander didn't answer directly. The only thing I can say is that this will be handled at the highest levels. But you, he paused, looking at each of them. You can't talk about this to anyone else. Derek laughed, incredulous. You're telling me this story is going to be classified? The commander didn't hesitate. Exactly. Jack clenched his fists. And how do you expect us to stay quiet after what we saw? The commander leaned over the table. Because if the public knows, the panic will be uncontrollable. The governments of the world don't know how to deal with this yet. If you talk, you'll end up disappearing one way or another. Sarah turned pale. You would do that? Blake Turner didn't need to answer. His look said it all. Jack closed his eyes. He knew the commander was right. If the world knew that gigantic monsters existed in the depths of the ocean, what would happen? Hours later, Jack, Sarah, and Derek were sitting on an empty pier, looking at the sea. The sun was starting to set, painting the ocean gold. But now, Jack couldn't look at those waters the same way. Derek broke the silence. So, what do we do? Jack took a deep breath. I think we move on. Sarah looked at him. That's it? Forget everything? Jack closed his eyes for a moment. No, we don't forget. We wait. Sarah frowned. Wait for what? Jack turned his gaze to the sea, where the sun was hiding on the horizon line. For the day that thing comes back. And deep down, he knew that day would come. Because monsters like those don't stay hidden forever. What did you think of this ending? Leave your opinion in the comments. We love to know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like to support our work. See you in the next video.